Right, good day, HSM 302 students. So today's lecture, which was supposed to be done on the 16th of October 2024, is going to be presented as a recorded lecture as Unit 5. I will start by saying this is a very, very important unit, and you might want to take careful consideration as it is potentially an exam unit. And this, of course, covers the National Housing Subsidy Programs. There are 11 in total. Something that's not on the slides, which I will highly recommend that you do, is to go onto the website of the National Department of Human Settlements and go through extensively the 11 programs and subsidies or the housing subsidy programs that are there, along with the presentation that I'll be giving to you briefly in about 30 to 35 minutes. All right. So we have already gone through the purpose of the module, provide the learner with knowledge required to design responsive policies for effective implementation through programs and projects utilizing appropriate funding mechanisms, systems, processes, and procedures. Now, the exit level outcomes we have already gone through, but for the purpose of repetition and the purpose of reminding ourselves as we edge closer to the test two and the final exam in November are as follows here. You may pause this video for the purpose of time. All right, so let's look at the overview of housing subsidy programs in South Africa. Where they come from is, of course, the National Housing Code of 2009. The National Housing Code, of course, comes as far back as 1997, was amended again in 2001, in 2006, and again in 2009. These effectively are the housing regulations as required by Section 4, and I would urge you to go over Section 4 of the Housing Code. Again, a reminder for you to go through all the prescribed reading for this module, and it contains all the approved national housing subsidy programs, and it provides the guidelines for implementation of these programs, creating a uniformity of how they should be applied. What is a government housing subsidy? A housing subsidy is a once-off grant by government. It's allocated to qualifying beneficiaries for the purposes of housing, so to fulfill the constitutional requirement of Section 26, and is not paid in cash. Very importantly, it's not paid in cash to the beneficiary, but it's paid to the seller of a house or property developer or to build. So it's paid to the person who owns either the land or owns the means of production to build the house, in other words, contractors. And any house or any unit completed under the subsidy program should comply with the minimum norms and standards. The minimum norms and standards, again, found in the Housing Code of 2009. Now, who is a qualifying housing beneficiary? A qualifying beneficiary is these two things. It has to be a South African citizen or permanent citizen. So if you're a foreign national, you cannot qualify for a housing subsidy. They are competent to contract, which is 18 years and above, and of sound mind. So people who have a diagnosed mental condition cannot participate. You have not benefited in subsidies in the past. Those that are married or habitually cohabitate with a partner in a solemnized union, you can be single with financial dependents or single aged without dependents, can be a military veteran as classified by the SANDF, and a gross monthly household income not exceeding 3.5. It says or 7,000. This was in the past for social housing. That has subsequently been increased to a broad range up to about 23,000 Rand for social housing. Now, what are the types Now, these are now what are the types of government housing subsidies? What you need to know is the purpose of the housing subsidy. This is for the purpose of you to understand, and secondly, for the purpose of you to be able to explain in an exam. Beneficiary and eligibility in terms of qualifying criteria, housing subsidy administration procedure, and of course, the housing subsidy annual values and applicable income bands. The first category is where there are financial interventions by the government, and a portion of the 11 subsidy programs will fall into the financial intervention category. These include the individual non-credit linked subsidy program. This is for individual household, and it's accessed through an approved home loan to purchase an existing house or to purchase a vacant land service stand and enter into an NHBRC linked building contract for construction. So this is effectively credit, non-credit linked subsidy, which the government provides for qualifying beneficiaries. Other one is the extended enhanced discount benefit scheme, where state-owned residential properties that need to be transferred to private properties, the sale debtors to settle the outstanding balance on purchase on prices bought. And these are all state finances where the effective owner, the erstwhile owner, would have occupied it prior to 1 July 1993. So stands or units contracted by 30 1993 and allocated to the individual by 15 March 1994. So these are all sort of pre-1994 state-owned land and properties exchanging hands to people that have occupied them for quite a while. The other program is the rectification program. This is the improvement of state-financed residential houses. So the so-called pre-1994 stock and also pre-NHBRC stock. Prior to there being NHBRC, houses were built in varying degrees of quality. And so all the houses pre 1994 and post 1994 all the way to 5 of March before NHBRC was involved in low-cost housing, and it can be utilized for the renovation of a top structure, upgrading of the top structure to meet the norms and standard, or a complete demolition and rebuild and an upgrade of the engineering services. And then there's a social and economic amenities subsidy program. This is the provision of social and economic amenities. This is the one that is not linked to the actual house where people live, but these are grants to municipalities to build taxi ranks, internal trading facilities, sports field, community parks, all part of the holistic government subsidy program for human settlements. And then there's the optional capital budget subsidy. Now, a certain percentage, or 3 to 5% of provincial housing subsidy allocation in the year is set aside. This one is not even involved in the end product, but it is to secure capacity. So if there is 100 million in subsidies for the province for that year, about 3 to 5% of that, let's call it 5 million, will be set aside to secure capacity and support of the implementation of various programs. This can secure external expertise that are not maybe in the department or in the municipality to augment the internal development capacity of municipalities or of the province. Okay, so these are the financial parts. The financial interventions included in that is the housing chapters of the IDP. So the housing chapter of the IDP, if you go onto the Nelson Mandela Bay Municipalities IDP or Integrated Development Plan, there is a chapter there on housing. Now, this supports housing planning as a component of IDPs. municipal housing needs assessed and defined. There is a subsidy that can assist financially in that. Community participation or housing voice a key component of planning process. Councillors involved in inform housing subsidy allocation by national and provincial departments. And of course, the accreditation of municipalities. There is a accreditation from level one all the way to level three. We're not going to dig deeply at this stage in accreditation, but one of the things that the provincial departments do is they accredit municipalities through the MEC for Human Settlements in consultation with the minister and the premier. The second one is the incremental intervention. These are some that you will be very familiar with because they deal with the end product that you see dotted on our landscapes dotted on our landscapes in our urban and rural environments. The first one is a consolidation subsidy program. You will see this, as I have said, in the National Department of Human Settlements National Department of Human Settlements website, and it goes into more in-depth detail. But essentially, it's a top-up subsidy to construct a house. Now, this is for people that have received a serviced site pre-1994, or those that were part of pre-1994 state-supported housing scheme or schemes that were done by the IDP or the Independent Development Trust, and applies to those that hold a lease in these properties and ownership of service sites. So this basically consolidates to, let's say you were given a subsidy of 15,000 and that was enough to build a substandard house or only give you a service site. The consolidation subsidy consolidates that into whatever the quantum is, let's call it 250,000. There will be a top up on that to make sure that you have it basically is an incremental upgrade to the level where you should be right now, because you would have benefited from a housing subsidy. However, this consolidates and tops up to make sure that you are equal to your neighbor who was not a beneficiary but has just received, say, a BNG house. Both of you guys or ladies would be in the income bracket and all the pre-qualifying criteria that then make you eligible for that. The IRDP. Now, this is the so-called RDP house or the BNG house. It's actually a departure from the first RDP, which is the Reconstruction and Development Program. This one is the Integrated Residential Development Program, but the RDP house is effectively the IRDP house. It's linked to a project built, so it will be an entire project which has beneficiaries by the municipality or provincial department and an appointed NHBRC registered contractor or contractors. And it facilitates the mixed income and multifunctional housing project. This is also called the inclusionary housing program, and it facilitates the participation of private sector through the contractors that are appointed in low-cost housing. And its very nature was to promote social and economic integration. And this is an interesting one. It's supposed to promote spatial restructuring. The finance-linked subsidy program, or formerly known as FLISP, it is now called as the First Home Finance, or FHF, is a subsidy targeting the gap housing market. So if you are too wealthy according to the standards to qualify for an IRDP house, but not wealthy enough to qualify for a bond, this subsidy allows you to buy an existing residential property through a bond, which is subsidized through the First Housing Finance program. whether you buy a vacant service residential site and then linked to an NHBRC home builder and you build a residential property, again, always linked to an NHBRC. The application is made by a financial institution. So this works through financial institutions on behalf of the beneficiary. Joint income, household income per month must not exceed 15,000. That has subsequently increased to 23,500, I believe. But because it has moved from FLISP to FHF, this is a program that the government is spending a lot of time around. So you might want to look at articles around first housing finance and what the evolution of this has been, because the financial industry has now started to get a hold of this as potentially a way of democratizing home ownership. The Informal Settlement Upgrade Program, now called the Informal Settlement Upgrade Partnership Grant, or ISUPG, provides secure tenure. So this is effectively what it is. Looking at an informal settlement, 150 or so in Nelson Mandela Bay, ensuring that incrementally providing access to basic services and shelter, and an area-wide or community-wide approach is promoted here, where it promotes in situ upgrading on the one hand and discourages relocation option or the greenfield options, and housing construction takes a range of options where you include the Enhanced People's Housing Program, which I'll talk about, contractor linked or the IRDP, and so forth. And the community involvement is integral to this process of the Informal Settlements Upgrade Partnership Grant, or the Informal Settlement Upgrading Program, as it is known. Now, the Emergency Housing Assistance Subsidy Program, you will know in places like Garriega, which was formerly the Utenague, in the news recently. And I will urge you as a clue to go and look up disaster and temporary shelters and articles around that. This subsidy is a promotion, or it provides temporary housing relief to households in stress. The program works under the simple circumstances. It's basically a second phase of disaster intervention after the first phase of moving people out of there, persons living in dangerous or life-threatening conditions in areas that are environmentally untenable, totally destitute households where someone is found to be living in really, really deplorable conditions, or households facing the threat of imminent evictions and cannot provide for themselves despite court order notices, or even people that are evicted, rightfully evicted, are in an emergency situation, but largely this is usually linked to disaster situations. So this is all still part of the incremental housing programs. The Enhanced People's Housing Process, or the EPHP. Now, the Enhanced is a new addition. It used to be called the PHP, where people were sort of their own contractor. But what was seen was that the quality here was very minimal. So the enhanced part was added to say communities, yes, they still take ownership of the process. They're the initiator of this. The houses are better suited to their individual needs, so they will design their own houses. Of course, the minimum standard is that it needs to conform to the norms and standards. And households get both technical, financial, logistical, and administrative support to build their houses. These programs are only made possible through a community resource organization. So communities themselves need to form formal organization called CROs, and they are appointed to provide support to households as they plan and build these homes. Now, category 3 is a social and rental interventions. Okay. Again, I want to stress that this unit is an important unit and potentially carries a lot of examinable content in it. So I would urge you, and part of the reason why I decided to record this is so that you have access to it You have access to it so that you can replay it in preparation for your revision. First one is the social housing program. Now, this is a rental or cooperative housing option which requires institutionalized management. Now, it initially targeted the income groups between 3,500 to 7,000. That scope has in increased to about 3,500 all the way to 23,000 because those are identified as gap housing, people that uh, uh, make money but not enough to afford purchasing or buying their own homes. Now, the social housing projects are in designated restructuring zones. Now, I would urge you to do this. Go and look at the restructuring zones for the Nelson Mandela Bay area and the whole of the Eastern Cape, including Buffalo City and so forth, because you might have to give explanation on what restructuring zones are. They're implemented through social housing institutions, and the Social Housing Regulatory Authority, or SHRA, accredit these SHIs, or social housing institutions, and approves social housing projects through allocating capital restructuring grants. Now, they are funded through what is called a capital restructuring grant, institutional subsidies, and the own equity of the SHIs themselves as well. So this option is all rental. The people that live there don't get to own this. It has been touted by government as the de facto program that is being promoted because of what they perceive to be its sustainability, because it's income producing in sort of perpetuity. The CRUs, or the community residential unit programs, is where public sector residential accommodation. This is secure and stable rental housing for low income groups. Think about all the hostels that were there in the past. What this program effectively does is it replaces the hostel redevelopment program, which were usually single gender accommodation units to include whole families. Now, this covers all public stock that cannot be transferred into the hands of individuals. So it cannot be sold or transferred. So it's all pure rental. And it targets people that earn below 3,500 and not able to access the formal market or social housing option. So this is a supplement then to that social housing program, in that it's for people that don't have enough money, are not in the formal economy, probably lived in hostels for very many years, and they will be able to pay nominal rents to be able to have the same kind of dignity as social housing, but paying significantly less in terms of rental because of their socio-economic status. So that is the CRUs, or the Community Residential Unit Program. Now, the fourth category is the rural interventions. Remember, housing subsidies are non-discriminate in the sense that they apply both to urban and rural environments. Very important that to know the communal land rights, or the rural subsidy. It's project based on communal land. So communal land in a place like Alice, for example, not accessible on an individual basis. So it takes a whole village, and it applies to household in rural areas who enjoy functional security of tenure. So functional in the sense that people in the rural areas have security of tenure because land is considered communal. Not one owner owns it, but sort of chiefs oversee it, but they also don't own it. They oversee it on behalf or to the benefit of all the families that reside there. Beneficiaries should have uncontested land rights on state or communal land, a very important component there. And another important one, farm worker residence subsidy program. This applies to farm residents or occupiers. And this is not for seasonal work, it's for people that have lived on farms or occupied farms, or areas in and around farms for many, many years. As I've said, it's either on the farm itself or off farm options. On farm requires the donation of that portion of the land by the farmer. So that land would be isolated, subdivided to the beneficiaries, and each beneficiary would be given security of tenure. All farm options are a symbol that's probably state land. That state land would then be subdivided, and people would be given individual title of that land. It also provides for both rental and ownership tenure forms. So it's quite flexible in the security of tenure that it provides on there. And that is the Farm Worker Residence Subsidy Program. So that was a rapid fire, quick lecture on Unit 5. Um, Very, very important though. This unit is going to be key as the unit on international convention, as the unit on the history of human settlements is going to be important. And we're going to be talking about in Unit 6, we're going to be talking about, and I want you to start reading in your study guide about neoliberalism. We're now going into the framework of the theories that frame policy and where policy is heading towards. So look at neoliberalism in your study guide. Look at the authors that have been referenced there, because those four components are going to be quite important as we go towards the end of the year. Of course, definitional issues, we've talked about them as well, but we're going to use the next lecture to deal with neoliberalism. Yeah, neoliberalism in the main. And then I think the last one that we're going to deal with is finance, which is Unit 7. But yeah, that's just a quote from our namesake there, Nelson Mandela. It always seems impossible until it's done. And I will expect a lot of engagement on the subsidy programs, as I have said, do a lot of digging around this so that you make sure that you have a full understanding of it. This has been Unit 5 of HSM 302, Human Settlements Policy and Implementation. All right.